Good morning. This hearing come to order. I've asked Bob to give us with a prayer. Bob?
Thank you. Our Heavenly Father, thank you for giving us the opportunity to serve here today. Also, thank you for bringing our witnesses here today and all the good work they do at the back of their universities to help agriculture and provide food and fiber for Americans. And also want to thank you for helping us cope with the tragedy of last week and the recovery of our good friend Steve Scalise and the others that were injured. And just our prayers are with them and their families. And thank you for bringing them back to us and to serve again. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Thank you, Bob. The hearing of Committee on Agriculture entitled The Next Farm Bill University Research will come to order. From the level of conversation before the hearing started, apparently there's an old home week back there. The witnesses must know half the room, given the conversations. As we continue working to craft the next Farm Bill, we turn our attention to one of the primary drivers of innovation and productivity in our 21st century agricultural economy, and that's university research. For more than 100 years, our producers have relied on investments in agricultural research to drive efficiencies, gains in productivity that have helped farmers and ranchers soldier through the toughest of times. While our focus today is on university research, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge our world-class teaching and extension programs that are responsible for disseminating the results of that research throughout the countryside and around the globe. This sustained investment, in part, has allowed the United States to enjoy the safest, most affordable, and abundant food and fiber supply in the world. The U.S. has long been a leader in the cutting-edge agricultural research, but our current budget problems have us scrutinizing every dollar, with public funding for agricultural research declining as a share of overall public research spending in the United States. While private sector investments have picked up some of the slack, results of privately funded research are often not publicly made available. Importantly, private sector research often builds upon fundamental research supported by our public investment. While I recognize that our budget problems cannot be ignored, it's important to note that the agriculture community has repeatedly answered the call for reform and has done more than its fair share to generate savings. The current Farm Bill was expected to save $23 billion over 10 years, but the most recent Congressional Budget Office projection show that the 2014 Farm Bill is now on target to save or not spend $104 billion, more than 4 times what was anticipated. If the U.S. is going to remain competitive going forward, we cannot afford to rest on the success of our past and take a backseat to the rest of the world. We must continue making key investments in our agricultural research system in the most efficient manner possible. Finally, I'd like to, while I will do our witness introductions in a second, because we've got several members who want to introduce their particular representative here, I do want to call attention to Robert Duncan, Chancellor from Texas Tech. Robert and I go back a long way to his service in the Texas Senate, and I look forward to hearing from him today. And I think Jody will also formally introduce you here in a moment. We also look forward to hearing Mr. Duncan and all of our witnesses about the ways to streamline and prioritize the agricultural research program in the next Farm Bill. With that, I yield to the ranking member for any comments he has.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And as you said, ag research is vital to our industry's future, and the research done by our land-grant universities and other institutions invests in the next crop of agriculture scientists and producers, and while ensuring that our farmers can be competitive and continue to meet the growing worldwide demands for our products. This can't be done, of course, without adequate funding for agricultural research programs, but I'm frankly not quite sure the best way to go about that. What I do know is that we need to continue to support the mandatory research programs that were created in the 2008 Farm Bill, and overall we still haven't fully realized our ag research goals, so I'll be looking to hear our witnesses' thoughts today on how we can do that. I'd like to see the next Farm Bill continue our commitment to ag research in a way that allows for continued advancement, but also recognizes our budget challenges, because ag research is the foundation of continued innovation in agriculture. Along with increased productivity, ag research has led to improvements in individual health and in the environment, along with other benefits. So with that, I welcome today's witnesses to the committee and look forward to their testimony. Thank the Chair and yield back.
Thank my colleague. The Chair would request that other members submit their opening comment statements for the record so that our witnesses may begin their testimony and to ensure there's ample time for questions. With that, I would like to welcome the witnesses to our table. Mr. Arrington, if you would introduce Chancellor Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say a few things. One, I'm just so delighted that my dear friend, longtime friend, Chancellor Duncan is here. He's the Chancellor of the greatest agriculture school in the United States of America. excuse me, and just happens to be my alma mater, and I'm just so proud that he's here. He grew up in a rural West Texas community, and his parents were in the agriculture space. He was a legislator in Texas, a state rep and a state senator for over 20 years, and a tireless champion for rural America and agriculture. And I'm just so happy he's here, and I'm proud of all the work he's doing at my alma mater, and I look forward to hearing from him. Thanks for being here.
With that, Mr. Yoho, would you introduce Dr. Jackie Burns?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm thrilled to be able to introduce Dr. Jacqueline Burns, Dean for Research and Director of the University of Florida Institute of Food and Agricultural Science, referred to as IFAS worldwide, the Florida Ag Experiment Station in my hometown of Gainesville, Florida. UF IFAS does such a phenomenal work that it's not just important across Florida's 3rd Congressional District, but which has a statewide, a nationwide, and indeed a global impact. And it is my alma mater. I'm a double Gator, and it is the real agricultural school. And I'm happy that you're here representing University of Florida. And I'd just end the remarks by saying, go Gators. And there's one other person that's a Gator that it'll come out, it'll be self-evident when he speaks. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yoho. We also have with us this morning Dr. Glenda Humison she's the Vice President, Agriculture and Natural Resources at the University of California in Oakland, California.
Would the gentleman yield?
I would.
I just want to welcome all of the panel, and I've worked for many years with Dr. Glenda Humison, and she does a terrific job. She's formerly with the USDA and now is with the University of California at Davis. So we're very pleased that you're here to testify.
Thank you, Mr. Costa. We also have Dr. Walter Hill, who's the Dean of the College of Agricultural, Environment, and Nutrition Sciences and the Vice Provost for the Land Grant Affairs, Tuskegee University, Tuskegee, Alabama. Dr. Hill, welcome. Dr. Stephen Talent, if Mr. Vela would introduce him.
Thank you, Chairman Conway and Ranking Member Peterson, for hosting this hearing on university research. Dr. Steve Talent, who is a good friend of mine, is here from the Texas A&M University of Kingsville, and he is the president of that institution. Dr. Talent has 20 years of military service and previously served as chief of the U.S. Air Force Family Research Program. Before being at the Texas A&M Kingsville, I believe he was in Wisconsin, if I'm not mistaken. Thank you, Dr. Talent, for being here, and feel free to reply to Mr. Arrington.
And we also have Ms. Carrie Billy, who's the President and CEO, American Indian Higher Education Consortium in Alexandria, Virginia. With that, Dr. Chancellor Duncan, if you would, your 5 minutes. Begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Ranking Member Peterson, members of the committee, Mr. Arrington, for your kind introduction. It's a great honor to be here today. I think, on behalf of all the panel, we appreciate this hearing and this ability for higher education to be heard as it relates to research and the contributions that we can make to furthering agriculture in this great country. My name is Robert Duncan. I am Chancellor of the Texas Tech University System. The Texas Tech University System has 4 components. I'll begin first with the 2 health science centers, Texas Tech Health Science Center that's headquartered in Lubbock but has campuses throughout West Texas in Amarillo, Abilene, Midland, and Odessa. While it only started in 1969, it now graduates more healthcare professionals in the state of Texas than any other institution. Nursing, pharmacy, and public health and allied health positions. And the significance of that for agriculture is a lot of those people, a lot of those professionals end up in rural Texas and rural America. And I think there's a real emphasis there. And that is part of agriculture, is having the opportunity to have great health care. In addition, we have a health science center on the Texas border in El Paso, first and the only medical school and health science center on the border. Our president can literally hit, he says, the Mexican border with a 3-iron. I don't know if that's true. We haven't tested it, but he says he can do it. I'm here today to talk a little bit about our other 2 institutions, our general academic institution, Texas Tech University, which was created in 1923, but has had a strong emphasis in core in agriculture, as well as our newest member of our system, Angelo State University, which is a comprehensive regional institution in San Angelo, Texas. Both of these institutions are in a significant part of the agriculture production of this country. and neither one of them are land-grant institutions. So where I want to leave you today, when I step away and you've listened to what I've had to say, is I want to talk a little bit about capacity. In Texas, a group of us back in the 2000s saw that we needed more capacity in our non-land grant institutions, as well as those that were not funded by the Permanent University Fund, which is a significant $18 billion endowment for higher education. And that's about 26 or 27 institutions, including Texas Tech University, Angelo State, Texas A&M at Kingsville, our partner down there. And so we started looking at different ways and the importance of capacity. And so to that extent, the Texas legislature created several different funds and opportunities for universities like Texas Tech, University of Houston, A&M Kingsville, and other institutions to start building capacity. And the importance of capacity is what we learned was if you don't have continuous, predictable funding for faculty and for infrastructure, then you will not be able to be competitive for private, public research, as well as research that is through the AFRI program and the Federal Competitive Grant Program. It takes funding that is predictable so that you can support your faculty, the infrastructure necessary for the faculty. And so, for example, I'll give the example of Texas Tech University. In 1996, we got zero funding for capacity. And as we started building these programs, last year we received about $20 million. We're about receiving about $20 million a year in capacity for research. That's why Texas Tech University is the #1 research university or non-land grant university in agriculture. I think the National Science Foundation ranks us as 41 in the country and #1 in non-land grant agriculture research. And I attribute that to capacity. So the point that I'm trying to get across here is that in the 2008, and I think again in 2014, this committee and Congress recognized the importance of non-land grant institutions competing for agriculture funds and needing more capacity. So the appropriation was $5 million a year. Well, with 70 non-land grant institutions, you can see that $5 million a year doesn't go very far. And so I think a help for institutions that are non-land grant would be significant. I noticed I'll give you an example of the importance of non-land grant institutions often is their regional location. And if you look, you've got a map in there where your land grant institutions are located. In the Panhandle and South Plains of Texas, the epicenter of food animal production, dairy, beef, cotton, grain sorghum, there are no land grant institutions in that region. The closest from Amarillo is Texas A&M, which is 505 miles away. So regionalism is very important. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chancellor. Ms. Burns, 5 minutes.
Chairman Conaway and members of this distinguished Committee on Agriculture, thank you for this opportunity to speak with you today. Agriculture is a major economic driver for the state of Florida. Agricultural research conducted at the University of Florida provides that knowledge, innovation, and tech transfer that supports 2.2 million agricultural-related jobs and direct industry output of $148 billion in Florida. Although Florida produces traditional row crops such as cotton, sugarcane, rice, and peanuts, Florida is primarily a specialty crop state. It's first in production of oranges and grapefruit, fresh market tomatoes, and many others. Livestock, forestry, fisheries are also significant production outputs of Florida's agricultural sector. Florida agriculture is diverse, as is the requirement for research in all of these important ag and natural resource systems. Competitive research awards authorized by the Farm Bill provide enormous opportunities for our faculty to support agricultural enterprises in the region, in the state, nation, and the world. Programs such as NEFA, AFRI, Specialty Crop Research Initiative, and its provision for block grants to the states of agriculture that fund regional needs have been effective, timely, and impactful. The Citrus Disease Research and Extension Program that was just recently authorized by the recent Farm Bill has been exceptionally helpful in our continued quest to solve the most devastating disease of citrus worldwide, citrus greening. Key issues we face include reduced funding that supports research infrastructure and the increasing need for longer-term research support that solves our modern agricultural challenges. I appreciate the opportunity to share ideas for streamlining Farm Bill competitive funding processes, expanding the use of the letter of intent process, delaying the entry of information at the submission stage is not necessary for evaluating the merits of the proposal, and providing larger long-term awards, de-emphasizing smaller awards when applicable, reduces the number of awards handled, and provides sustaining opportunities for researchers. I also appreciate the opportunity to share ideas for prioritizing programs in the Farm Bill. First, invasive species. Florida's geography means that it's often ground zero for the introduction of costly invasive species and diseases within the continental United States through its many ports of entry. Prioritizing and expanding the scope of invasive species programs to accommodate all threats to commercial ag lands, production systems, and natural lands would greatly improve our response to threats. And prioritizing more proactive research to the extent possible would accelerate development of science-based solutions before the full impact of invasive threat develops. Alternative crops, number 2, expanding and prioritizing alternative crop breeding and management programs that focus on sustainable production. This also gives our producers opportunities to remain in agriculture and even diversify their operations. Precision agriculture and automation such as mechanical harvesting, prioritizing these important programs would be important. Stakeholder engagement, finally, and prioritizing that opportunity would help the whole process to prioritize program for national research investment. Finally, a few words about research infrastructure and deferred maintenance. High-quality research infrastructure is essential to build and maintain research capacity. At the University of Florida, with over $16 million in deferred maintenance costs and reduced funding to maintain its existing agricultural research infrastructure, the University of Florida IFAS has fallen below the critical investment level needed to prevent failures in building systems. The landscape of our universities and IFAS agricultural infrastructure is a patchwork of primarily decaying infrastructure with an occasional new facility built with opportunistic public and private funds. What is needed is a principled approach to agricultural research infrastructure investments that prevents building systems failures, enhances our ability to conduct world-class research, and emphasizes our world stature as a premier location for cutting-edge fundamental and applied research. One way to do this would be to include provisions in a new Farm Bill for university infrastructure investments that could provide an opportunity for solutions to this critical deferred maintenance problem. A principled approach that requires matching funds from the university or state sources would signal important contributions between federal and state agencies. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Burns. Glenda, how do you pronounce your last name? Just Costin, I did it differently.
It is Humiston. Thank you.
All right, Dr. Humiston, you're ready.
Great, thank you very much. Chairman Conaway, Ranking Member Peterson, and members of the committee, it's an honor to be here today. Thank you for the invitation to discuss research issues and opportunities in the next Farm Bill. As part of the University of California, we're quite thrilled to have been there at its very beginnings in 1868. It has grown into a 10-campus system throughout the state. We predominantly work with 3 of those campuses, Berkeley, the original one, Davis, and Riverside. However, we partner with all 10, as well as our California State University system and our community colleges increasingly on a variety of projects. We have over several hundred academics scattered around the state, many of them on those 3 campuses, a few on others, and a few located with another partner, the USDA Ag Research Service, at some of their facilities. We have over 200 of those actually scattered throughout the state in every county doing robust research programs along with delivering a wide array of programs. Many of these from capacity funds, including our world-class 4-H youth development program, a highly touted integrated pest management program, a statewide nutrition policy institute, and a water research institute, as well as several others. We take great pride in the work we do and the partnerships we have with folks out in the field. Frankly, if it weren't for the farmers and landowners out in the field we work with, as well as the rural communities and increasingly urban communities, we couldn't begin to do a fraction of the work we do. And not only those partners, but our volunteer base. Over 20,000 Californians volunteer for programs like 4-H, Master Gardeners, California Naturalists, etc. Their labor is valued at over $40 million a year, and they greatly help us extend our programs. You've heard from previous speakers here the importance of the investment in our land-grant university. One thing I would mention is recent studies that show that on average, that investment is 20 to 1. In other words, every $1 of federal expenditure has a payback of about $20 to the American public. The statistics my number crunchers give me tell me that that's an annualized rate of return between 9 and 10%. I don't know about you, but frankly, I wish my portfolio on Wall Street did nearly as well consistently. But it's important to understand that that kind of consistent return and the great benefits it has provided to our public and our nation and food security relies upon a key bunch of infrastructure out there that we've got to maintain and invest in. I refer to several things. First, capacity funds. Without that long-term infrastructure and the people there, we cannot make good use of the competitive grants that we are constantly going after. Competitive grants are great, and I think it's important that we fund those and perhaps increase funding in those. That's a recommendation that several organizations have put forward now. But the reality is, to really solve agricultural problems, we have to keep in mind the long-term nature of those problems. There was an article in the Washington Post this week about mechanization and pursuit of that, but I think a key thing to remember there is that tomato harvester developed at University of California would not have worked without the plant genetics program that made a tomato able to be machine harvested. That kind of work takes anywhere from 1 to 2 or more decades. We need to keep that in mind. Another big issue that folks are focusing on right now is our deferred maintenance. Our infrastructure is, frankly, a mess. The systems I oversee, we have identified over $45 million in work just to get to functionally adequate. We have roofs that are leaking, and that doesn't even count the infrastructure on the 3 campuses we work with. That's just our research extension centers and other facilities out in the more rural parts of the state. We're stepping up to the plate to deal with that. I will get our facilities up to at least functionally adequate before I leave my tenure here, but it's going to take help from the federal government, the state government, and the private sector to help us create the world-class facilities that we all need. Having said that, though, I do want to insert a note of caution because we know there's probably not much appetite for this in the federal farm bill. People are looking at the potential of the infrastructure bill. But quite frankly, our experience at UCSF Medical Center, which is a large research facility, is that the kind of rates of return that the private sector wants in investing in these doesn't work well for research facilities. It's an issue that really needs further looking. There's many other issues to look at. I provided those in written testimony, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Dr. Hill, 5 minutes.
Yes. Good morning. Chairman Conway, Ranking Member Peterson, and members of the committee. I come before you today on behalf of the entire land-grant university system, and will thank you for the opportunity to speak before you on food and agriculture at 1890 land-grant universities. August 30, 2015, Congress recognized the 125th anniversary of the signing of the Second Morrill Act, which created the historically black land-grant universities. Today, these universities are an integral part the Board and Agriculture Assembly Association of APLU, and we endorse the APLU Farm Bill recommendations and budget priorities. I want to say that we boldly assert that men and women of talent and ability, regardless of their socioeconomic condition, can contribute to the common good through hard work and the opportunity to develop and prosper. In this regard, we want to point to several budget items. First of all, the 1890 land-grant university capacity funding and 1862 capacity funding. We fully support that, And we want you to take note of the fact that the legislation requires the 1890s to have 30% of what the 62s have for research and 20% for extension. We have not made that. So please take a look at that in the coming year to get us full partners based on what Congress has done said before. The second one is the 1890 Capacity Building Grant Program. For 100 years, the 1890s received minimum or no funding after having been established for research or research facilities. The Capacity Building Grants Program is trying to make up for that. It actually was conceived in brilliance because it's competitive. It brings out the best of us, it addresses the nation's priorities, and critical is that it brings in the partners. So other universities, producers, private sector are integral as we do that, get better in our competitiveness, and we're finding ourselves becoming more competitive in the overall competitive grants program, not only with USDA, but also NSF and NIH. So that's one we want to keep and actually strengthen. Then the 1890 Facilities Program. Again, after 100 years, you're in a race with 100 laps, and you begin and the other partner's already 100 laps ahead. So this is critical that we have this small investment. It's really a tiny amount of money, but it goes an extremely long way in refining our labs. And what does that do? So when I go and partner with California or Texas or Davis, Ohio, Illinois, Minnesota, those scientists now partner well with us because we have better facilities. It also attracts better scientists. In terms of the APLU Deferred Maintenance and Infrastructure Program, we are 100% in support of that program. There's one issue around that. Not even all the 1890s have state matching funds. Most 1862s have substantially more. So when it comes to facilities, it looks like this initiative, as my colleagues have said, is going to require state matching, private matching. So for the 1890s to be in that ball game, we're going to have to figure out a formula where we might partner and leverage so that we can all benefit and have cutting-edge facilities in that regard. And we can do it. We've done some great things in Alabama partnering, and we could even exemplify that across the nation if need be. The 1890 Centers of Excellence. Just want to say, after 125 years, we all came together, spent critical time as scientists, came up with 3 excellent concepts, received $2 million to fund those for all 18 states, and we'll just challenge you to look at the record of what we accomplished with that small amount of money. Had we received the $35 million we requested or have some section more than that, we would be magnificent. And the results are national in scope, not just regional. Congressman Scott has requested through HB 51 $19 million initiative, $1 million scholarships for these schools. Now, let me just say, in terms of farmers, progressive technology-savvy farmers coming out, African-American, other minorities, in terms of all the career areas where private industry is crying because they don't have the diversity, this will be some of your best spent dollars because you already have the dynamic going. Now we have funds to attract the engineers, the students who have different capabilities and interests to focus in on agricultural problems. I just want to close by saying that the Congressman Justin Morrow, one of the founders of the Republican Party and the father of the land-grant institutions, established the Second Morrow Act and included conditions that former slaves, African Americans, would not be discriminated against and be included in the U.S. land-grant university higher education system. Let's keep that going and improve on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Teal. Dr. Talent, 5 minutes.
Good morning. I'm Stephen Talent, president of Texas A&M University, Kingsville, and here today on behalf of the Hispanic Association of Colleges and Universities. Chairman Conaway, Ranking Member Peterson, my good friend and fellow South Texan, the Honorable Philemon Vela, and fellow members of the House Agricultural Committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. The scarcity of Hispanic participation in agriculture-related academic programs and professional ranks within the industry is made worse by the relatively low level of federal agricultural investments in HSIs. This committee recognized this disparity and included the Hispanic-serving agricultural colleges and universities authorizations in the previous Farm Bill, and I'll refer to those as HSCUs from now on. A&M Kingsville's enrollment has been over 60% Hispanic since the formation of the HSIs, and over 50% of our graduates in agriculture are Hispanic. A&M Kingsville's agricultural students consistently win state and national awards. These awards reflect the commitment of our faculty, the excellence of our academic programs, and the diligence of our students to constantly strive for success. However, one area of concern is our aging agricultural research infrastructure. This problem has been highlighted at universities doing agricultural research across the United States. A&M Kingsville has been working with the agricultural community since 1948. We have 3 agricultural centers of expertise: the Citrus Center, the Caesar Clayburgh Wildlife Research Institute, and the King Ranch Institute for Ranch Management. Our Citrus Center has helped the industry recover from devastating freezes and deal with multiple disease threats like greening and Phytophthora. The other centers help our livestock and wildlife industries deal with cattle tick fever and other issues. These industries represent over $5 billion in Texas. Our alumni have gone on to manage multi-million-dollar agricultural enterprises and federal agencies to help advance agriculture. Today, our faculty and students participate in over $12 million in annual agricultural research expenditures. This includes over $5 million from USDA programs, and we leverage these funds to attract an additional $7 million annually. These research have made dramatic improvement on our retention, graduation rates, and participation in graduate and other professional degrees. We have actively participated in competitive grant programs, including USDA grants, and 10% of our student participants in these programs have gone on to complete graduate and professional degrees. I would like to include one example. Veronica Ancana was one of our master's students funded by you through an HSI grant. She went on to complete her PhD, and today Dr. Ancona is a faculty member at our Citrus Center where she researches critical issues like citral greening and water use. Last year, she was awarded the Rising Star Award by our Alumni Association. All of this is possible because of your investments in HSIs. This committee has long supported the value of agricultural research through the development of the land-grant system and minority-serving agricultural research programs. They have also recognized the potential value that HSCUs can contribute to agricultural research. We need this cooperative approach, and we ask the committee to maintain the authorizations and funding level for the 6 HSCU programs included in the 2014 Farm Bill. To truly achieve the objective of increasing Hispanics in agriculture, we also urge members of this committee to work with your colleagues, particularly those on the appropriations committees, to provide the funding needed to carry out these programs effectively. Given the low number of Hispanics in agricultural-related careers, the creation of a pipeline of researchers and research at HSCUs at all levels would strengthen the research capacity of these institutions and help meet employer demands. Hispanic-serving institutions are the most important pipeline for increasing Hispanic success in the higher education and involvement in agricultural research opportunities. HSCUs can better serve the nation if the necessary investments are made. This was the intent of this committee when HSCUs were authorized in 2008, and I believe this should be a priority in the next reauthorization of the Farm Bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Talent. Ms. Billy, 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, ranking members, and many members of the committee, on behalf of the nation's 34 tribal colleges and universities, the 1994 land grants, thank you for this opportunity to testify. Indian country includes some of the most isolated and economically challenged regions of the nation, but our lands are rich in natural resources and our people are among the most resilient in the world. Within this context, tribal colleges are planting seeds of hope. They are working to strengthen tribal economies, revitalize our language, and protect, restore, and sustainably use our lands, waters, and traditional foods. In 1994, tribal colleges received federal land grant status. Today, the 1994s epitomize the intent of the first Morrill Act. We truly are community-based institutions, and we are defined by place. Our stories, songs, and lands come from the land, mountains, water, and wind. Most of our land, the remaining tribal lands in this country, are forested or agriculture lands. Research conducted by the 1994s touches on big global challenges, but in a way that's related to our land and our place. Most of our research is conducted with scientists and researchers from other land-grant institutions and federal research centers. First, because our legislation requires it, but second, because we benefit from it. We leverage their expertise, equipment, and connections to maximize our small grants. Dr. Kerry Hartman at Nueta Hidatsa Sanish College in North Dakota and his students are working with the tribal game and fish biologists and South Dakota State University to figure out how to develop and maintain an environment that will support native pollinators of juneberries and other traditional plants. Juneberries are an ancient plant. Their high levels of protein, calcium, and antioxidants sustained generations of native people throughout the northern plains and woodlands until they fell victim to westward expansion. If we can restore the juneberry's native habitat, we could sustainably cultivate crops for local use and small farm commercial production, helping us to grow our reservation economies and improve the health status of our people. We will also be restoring the cultural identity of the Mandan, Hidatsa, and Arikara people. This project would not happen without USDA's support for specialty crop research. The need for research into emerging technologies for small farmers, invasive species management, sustainable growth, and food security is essential to Indian country. Dr. Steve Dahlberg at White Earth Tribal and Community College in Menominee, Minnesota is conducting research on land use, water quality, and wild rice productivity. This research is important because wild rice is one of the key cultural, economic, and nutritional resources of the Anishinaabe people, but they face challenges in protecting it. Some of the challenges are genetic, but many are connected to water quality and land use. Tribal resource departments face more challenges. They lack the personnel and resources to comprehensively monitor water quality and study its impact on wild rice. The college is working to determine whether satellite data can be a cost-effective predictor of wildlife productivity. The key is to find satellite data that correlates with biochemical water quality parameters and rice stands productivity. The college can then share this data with the tribe, who can then use it to identify areas for further monitoring, making data-driven decisions and targeting limited resources in the most effective way. At the same time, tribal college students are building research skills that could sustain their tribal identity and culture and economy. To do this, White Earth is leveraging 1994 research funding with resources from NASA, the U.S. Geological Service Aeros Data Center, and the local Agriculture Research Service Lab. According to Dr. Dahlberg, the USDA funding is the grease that makes those relationships happen. As you work to reauthorize the Farm Bill, we have 4 quick recommendations. 1, acknowledge the value of undergraduate place-based research and education. The Farm Bill research provisions should acknowledge that diversity matters. Students and faculty at 1994 and other minority and small institutions can enhance cultural competency and research capacity for the next generation of scientists and agriculture practitioners. 2, resist efforts to consolidate federal STEM programs. History demonstrates that small and poor institutions, even those with great ideas, have a difficult time competing against Research One institutions. 3, establish McIntyre-Stennis eligibility for 1994s. This is a matter of equity. In 2008, the McIntyre-Stennis Act was amended to include tribal lands in the formula for state forestry programs, but tribal land grant institutions were excluded. Please amend the Mac-Stennis formula to include 1994s with forestry programs. And 4th, let tribal colleges compete in all the land grant programs. The 2000 Farm Bill opened up the Smith-Lever 3D programs to all land grants except the 1994s. 1994s can't participate in the Children, Youth, and Families at Risk program or the federally recognized Tribal Extension program. Yet, ironically, we are the only land grants that are actually chartered by federally recognized Indian tribes. So please open up the 3D program so that we can compete with other land grant institutions. Thank you.
Well, I'm not sure we've ever had 5 witnesses stick so religiously to their own 5 minutes. Congratulations, you're the best panel ever. Chair would remind members they'll be recognized for questioning in order of seniority for members who are here at the start of the hearing. After that, members will be recognized in order of arrival. I appreciate our members' understanding. Recognize myself for 5 minutes. First off, thank the witnesses for rescheduling. I had a conflict yesterday, and you were very accommodating to that, so thank you very much for that. It's the rare institution that doesn't have an aggressive building program going on across, dormitories, everything's going out there. And yet, all of you, or most of you, mentioned a lack of labs and greenhouses and $8.4 billion in just deferred maintenance. Can you help us understand the disconnect between how ag research competes within your own universities and within the state systems to get dollars to create the infrastructure that then can be used to compete for the grants? Can you walk us through some of that? And anyone who wants to start, I'd appreciate hearing from anybody else an idea.
Well, I'll begin, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, microphone. The microphone.
I'll begin. I know that at Texas Tech University, we have multiple disciplines on the campus. And so even though we do have significant infrastructure support from the state of Texas, that's a competing thing with engineering and other health science issues that are on the campus. And so, it's just like anything else. The infrastructure is related to agriculture is going to be competing with all of the other disciplines on the campus for those different funds. There's not a specific state infrastructure fund for agriculture. It's basically goes to the institutions and it's allocated in that way. So the state of Texas has been good, though, I think, in going back to the capacity issue that I talked about successfully in providing infrastructure for institutions that through tuition revenue bonds and as well as through HEAF funding. And that capacity, I think, has helped Texas Tech be able to compete in all of our disciplines. But there is still competition, obviously, and no specific allocation of funds for agriculture alone.
Yeah, I would offer 2 thoughts. One is, I think that we as research institutions are equally guilty as the public at large in that when we have to make choices, hard choices, we tend to go after the researchers. Because at the bottom, at the end of the day, it's our people that are really getting a lot of the research done. And we've all got some world-class academic researchers in both the Ag Experiment Station and Cooperative Extension. And as we've dealt with cuts and increased costs over the past few decades, I believe I know for and I think some of the others here too, it's been easy to say, oh, we could put off fixing that roof or put off buying that new piece of equipment a few more years if we can keep those researchers doing their work. So that's one issue that I think has contributed to this. Unfortunately, I think that's been going on for decades rather than a few years, and that's why it's gotten so critical at this point. The other thing, the general public, and in particular large funders, tend to not view agriculture as a particularly sexy topic. We've done such a great job for over 150 years of providing a safe, secure, wonderful, bountiful food supply. People take it for granted. So when we're out there trying to do capital campaigns and funds development for our facilities, we're competing against the moonshot on cancer and similar things like that. And quite frankly, it's a challenge to compete against curing cancer or finding new stem cell uses or anything like that. And I think that's been a factor for all of us. So those 2 things in particular.
A couple of you mentioned the idea about return on investment. If you have thoughts, I don't expect you necessarily to have them this morning, but if you have thoughts of a way that we could, from the federal standpoint, help augment that, what appears to be return of investment that would allow you to be more competitive in those circumstances, be interested in hearing those thoughts as well. Not necessarily this morning, but as we develop the Farm Bill. Anyone else have a thought on the challenge of competing against the other legitimate needs that are on every one of your campuses for facilities?
I would just add that in our institution, it's a matter of prioritization, which is the highest priority with respect to our mission, with our stakeholders and so forth. And often agriculture is not high on the list. In general, we fund deferred maintenance with a cost to landline use in Florida. And as you can imagine, that fund is decreasing exponentially.
Dr. Hill.
Yeah, I want to say, take a lesson from when you required the states to do one-to-one match for 1890s. I'm going to get to infrastructure. What happened there was the 3 land grants in Alabama got together, went to the legislature together, formed an alliance, the Alabama Agricultural Land Grant Alliance, and we made a breakthrough that no one expected would happen, and we've been really moving in a good direction ever since. So that was 1999. What catalyzed that was what came out of from you all, because the legislatures see that, and so if you put together a infrastructure dynamic that encourages, incentivizes the states, and you also incentivize them to work together, then we can do the creative side on our end. And I think that would benefit the public. It sure has in Alabama.
Real quickly, Dr. Talent, real quick.
Yes, sir, real quick. I just want to echo what everybody said. The Texas funds us well, but in my case, I have a university of 10,000 students. 1/3 of my students major in engineering. I have 20 engineering degree programs, and it's a matter of priority. And as what was said before, agriculture, it doesn't always go there. As a result, my College of Agriculture today is deferred maintenance is $12 million. That's a lot of money for my campus. And what would help would be dedicated money, matching or how we did it, but dedicated for agriculture because there are other competing needs.
Appreciate that. Mr. Peterson, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's was a recent editorial about the creation of the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research, praising, this approach. And in the article, one thing I wasn't aware of, that apparently China is now has an advantage of 2-to-1 over us in ag research, which ought to make people nervous. And so, from everything I can tell, this new initiative of the 14 Farm Bill has been successful. And it's been a quicker model, and it's responded quicker and brought some other resources to the table. But what I'm concerned about, in my experience over the years of having to try to advocate for smaller crops in the whole research area, and back when we had earmarks, we were able to do that. Now that we don't have earmarks, we really are falling short with some of these smaller crops that don't have the checkoffs, don't have the resources. So I think it's a good idea to maybe bring private money in, but I kind of worry about this whole private-public thing because it's going to maybe allow people to jump the line in case of some projects, and in some rural areas in Gregla, Minnesota, we are not going to attract any private money of any kind for any kind of project. So, so I just wonder if any of you have experienced that what we've seen so far with this, where this is maybe advantaged somebody over another because they have the money and somebody else doesn't have the money. Is that an issue that you think we need to worry about? Any of you that want to jump in?
Thank you. Let me comment. Yes, I think we are losing our edge. We still have very good people, and our international colleagues seek to send others over here to learn what we have to offer. But the fact of the matter is that we, because of our infrastructure, because of the decaying nature of it and our ability to invest in it, we simply cannot keep up with making those world-class investments for those facilities and to keep our people from jumping ship and going to China and other places. So I think it's really important to understand the value of sustained investments for those projects that are regional in nature. Sometimes we thought that the capacity funds would have been very good for that because it allows us to make those quick decisions about those needs right away without the involvement of a longer competitive process. So capacity funds, I think, are very, very important in us meeting those kinds of needs and keeping us competitive.
Yeah, if I could augment that for a second. We actually are working very closely with the Foundation for Food and Ag Research, FFAR, which you mentioned, and that was a particularly good article. I think the concept of FFAR is excellent. The idea of leveraging public dollars with private dollars, I'm a big fan of that myself. And FFAR has done an amazing job in a short amount of time, standing up a lot of research, getting a lot of dollars out the door. But the very fact that they've been able to do such an excellent job so quickly is its own testimony to the need for capacity funds. They would have never been able to do such an outstanding job if we didn't already have infrastructure in place, researchers hired, researchers with labs able to step up and say, okay, I can make good use of that money and start solving agriculture's problems today, not a year or two from now.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I want to add a human dimension to that. I want to evoke the name of George Washington Carver. And where I'm coming from is when you have an outstanding scientist who loves people, who loves agriculture, and spends time with the farmers on the farm production and in the lab and with their students, you get a different product. You get the science changes, and it becomes more usable, the results to the farmer in a shorter term. That's what we need. We need more scientists like that. We have our bench scientists doing all the fancy stuff that goes quickly, but that takes time to reach the people who we're trying to reach now. Capacity funds help that. Matter of fact, that may be the edge for why capacity funds may need to be strengthened, because now you're dealing with both research and the people at the same time. And the majority of the farmers, 80 to 95%, who are the small and medium size.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yield back.
Jim yields back. Mr. Gibbs, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I'd kind of follow the ranking member's questions a little bit. In agriculture, you know, we're talking about the challenge of funding and competition, competitive grants and all that. The way the industry's gone, the science of agriculture, I guess, can you relate to me how the interaction between the different disciplines are? For example, agriculture has a lot of interaction with engineering, obviously, Department of Engineering, medicine, so that interaction there, partnerships, and then also, is anybody, or how's it, or is there hurdles to do more, quote, partnerships or long-term contracts even with the private sector to even do basic research to help bring in additional funds and long-term arrangements, or is that happening? And so those kind of two things, how do you interact with the different disciplines, and then how do you interact with the private sector on long-term research projects? And anybody wants to jump in can go first.
Trying to make sure I'm not hogging a microphone up here. I included a couple examples in my written testimony, but one I might highlight specific to your question. I'm a big fan of collaboration and partnerships. It gives all of us a chance to leverage each other's resources, and in particular, not reinvent the wheel, not duplicate. That's a strategy we're pursuing in California extremely aggressively right now. And one example that shows very high promise is efforts in our Central Coast. Congressman Panetta, who left already, it's in his region. But we're bringing together our University of California, Santa Cruz, with our CSU, Monterey Bay, with 3 community colleges, a USDA agricultural research facility, and Western Growers, an organization of private farmers. 2 or 3 things happening there. Western Growers has an incubation center they're supporting in Salinas. Hartnell Community College has a couple hundred acres that they use to teach their community college kids various types of workforce issues related to ag and ag-related jobs. USDA is adjacent to that, so we've got about 300 acres there. We're actually pursuing a partnership right now to formalize a brand new research and extension center that will be jointly community college, University of California, USDA, in a way that really hasn't been done before. And have the private sector deeply engaged. I'm quite optimistic about our ability to do that. We're looking at similar partnerships throughout the state. Not to say that each of us individually don't need to have the ability to bring our own funding to the table, but that kind of partnership really can stretch. as well as the ability to get the multidisciplinary.
Do you see a willingness from the private industry sector, wanting to put resources in?
Oh, absolutely. Western Growers, which is private industry,
yeah,
have put several $1 million into their incubation, ag tech related.
Anybody else, Texas, or want to comment? No.
Well, I'd like to comment on that. For the tribal colleges and I think other small rural institutions conducting research, getting the private sector involved is very difficult. So we actually have a challenge getting private sector to even come onto tribal land. So there's, with the American Indian institutions, there's a challenge of not only having to deal with the state regulatory rules, but also the federal rules on tribal land. So we can't do bonding and things like that make it more difficult for private sector to come onto the reservations, which makes the partnerships with the federal government and other federal entities even more important. And that's one thing I think as under-resourced institutions, tribal colleges do very well, mixing, using funding from USDA, National Science Foundation, NASA, and other agencies in a way that's increasing STEM teaching and learning, but also research opportunities.
Two examples. One is, one day we looked around and saw biology, chemistry, veterinary med, all the ag science, and realized we had a powerhouse and created a PhD in integrated biosciences and have never looked back. We didn't even know what we had. Now the private sector became interested. We have money to help with one laboratory and the future looks good. Another example is we recently had a scientist who had won a NEFA competitive grant in organic farming. And he has 4 1862s as his partner. And I was there when they came to campus, kind of blown away. They're really going to do a master piece of work across the South together. So that's the future.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Chairman. You'll back.
Mr. Scott, David Scott from Georgia.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Hill, let me start off by thanking you and each of the 19 African-American land-grant universities. First, for mentioning our legislation, House Resolution 52. And for folks who may not know, House Bill 52 is a very, very strong bipartisan effort to provide our 1890 universities with student scholarships in the amount of $1 million for each of the 5 years, $95 million for all of the 1890s over the 5-year period of the Farm Bill. This is so important. And Dr. Hill, your testimony in touching upon the road that the African-American community has had to travel in this country has been a tough road. And it is our dear hope that the chairman of our committee will give a schedule to bring up this bill, a bipartisan bill, so we can get it out of this committee, onto the floor, and over to the Senate, where we've already got senators lined up to get it on over to the White House for the president's signature. We're at that moment now, and I am sure that we will have an opportunity to get that bill called up and passed. It's the first step. It's bipartisan. The other thing is the whole 1890s was started by Republicans. What a strong bipartisan effort it would be to lift up the 1890s with this bill and give a shining light out of the darkness. Because not only in the area that we've talked about here, Dr. Hill, but you had mentioned that about the one-to-one match for the 1890s institution's cultural research funding, and that the institution must request a waiver to get the federal funds without the state match. And while to my knowledge, no waiver application has never been denied, but that leaves the African American 1890s institutions with half as much money as Congress intended. That's like giving you something with one hand and slap you in the face with the other. And that has to stop. Most states that have both predominantly white 1862s and predominantly African American 1890 institutions submit a joint plan of agricultural research so we know that they have information on the research plan for the years. So let me ask you, Dr. Hill, do states currently fund and match all land-grant colleges at the same level?
No.
All right. The follow-up question is, what can we here in Congress do to encourage states to match each institution in the state at an equivalent amount up to 100%? Why not do that? That's what Merrill, the Republican congressman, said, separate but equal. We're separate, all right, but we've never been equal. But this year's Farm Bill, with this money for scholarships, and with us getting some equality in this matching, what a powerful, powerful message that would send. Republicans and Democrats working together to lift up our 1890s African-American institutions.
I'll just respond briefly. I guess I might be the old timer here, having 40 years in as dean at Tuskegee, and having worked the legislature in Alabama and worked with Auburn and A&M and all the system. I would just say this, and recently talked with Sonny Ramaswamy. The new plan of work provides you with an opportunity, because the first thing you see on that plan of work is how the funds are distributed for each state. And my recommendation to him was that we do a report card for each state, because they do a summary write-up of how the states do when they send in those reports. I challenge you all to look at your plan of work reports and results for your particular states and look at those first few pages. That will tell the whole story. And then if we had a report card, we can put on there points, and one of the points would be matching. And a state that did everything right but didn't do the matching would not get a good grade on that one. And it would stand out, and we would share that with our legislatures. I think we would have a good conversation.
Thank you very much, Doctor.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Gentleman's time has expired. Mr. Crawford, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chancellor Duncan, you represent a non-land-grant university, but you're still very much engaged in agriculture, and I'm a graduate of a very similar system. Arkansas State University is very similar to Texas Tech in that regard. As you mentioned in your testimony, the Competitive Capacity Building Program for non-land-grant institutions, first authorized in the 2008 Farm Bill, has made some significant impacts for a small size, $5 million of the fund. How's Texas Tech used federal funding such as this to advance ag research?
Well, it's obviously an infrastructure and improving our labs and being able to maintain the faculty that we have, combined with the state investment in capacity. And, one of the points I'm trying to make here today is that Texas has invested in capacity. And since that initiative was started in 2007, we've had 5 institutions in the state of Texas advance to the highest research category in the Carnegie classification. And so it's a combination. The funds that the federal programs provide us certainly allow us to augment that infrastructure, but it's still so small that while it moves the needle, it doesn't move the needle enough. Texas Tech has been in the agricultural research arena for a long, long time. Obviously, where it's located in the epicenter of all these different agricultural activities. But at the same time, the capacity has been growing slowly until the state infused that. And I think the point I'm trying to make is the federal investment in capacity to the non-land grant institutions can make a significant difference in the regional types of research that occur for the better of agriculture. For example, one thing we've talked about is the combination or the cross-disciplinary of human health and animal health. Those are the types of things that, with the proper infrastructure, the proper investment in the health science centers, in the veterinary medicine, into the colleges of ag sciences and their food nutrition programs, food safety programs, we can really move the needle on food safety and on One Health, which is the health of all of us as it relates to agriculture.
You mentioned the importance of leveraging federal dollars with state and private dollars. Talk about that, about your plant science department's partnership with Bayer and some of the examples of public-private partnerships related to your ag activity on campus.
Yeah, Bayer's been a very significant player in, of course, the cotton world, which we now have one of their greenhouses on our campus, as well as they invested in one of our labs and plant and soil science labs on the campus. We were able to get their investment in that by a program called TRIP. It's a state infrastructure program. It's a matching program. And for example, for anything above $2 million up to $10 million, the state matches it 100%. So you can imagine the return on that investment is significant and allows, and is very attractive to private partnerships whenever you can leverage a gift such as that. Not too long ago, using the TRIP match, we also received a grant from Tees in Australia and Cargill, $2 million, which will be matched with $2 million in the state TRIP program. So it's those types of infrastructure programs that really move the needle for the types of research that we need in agriculture to keep moving us forward in the growth of our population and also the complexity of agriculture as it exists today.
You also mentioned the importance of non-land grant universities in the education of underrepresented groups. Does Texas Tech offer scholarships or special programs that seek to engage groups such as first-generation college students, first-generation farmers, minority and rural students in university research?
Yes, sir. We have significant programs along that line. Our Board of Regents, and in particular, Angelo State University in our system has achieved Hispanic serving institution status several years ago. Texas Tech University, which is about 37,000 now, we're on the very cusp of about 24.3% Hispanic students, and we will be a Hispanic serving institution, at least according to our board's predictions as well as their priorities, probably in a year. And those programs really do help us to be able to be attractive to Hispanic students. We're in a great place in Texas as it relates to recruiting and retaining students, Hispanic culture, and it's been an exciting thing. But we do have programs, and that is a very strong priority of our Board of Regents.
Excellent. Yield back.
Chairman yields back. Mr. Costa, 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing, and I concur with my colleague from Texas who talked about the non-land grant universities and the fact that in 2008 we did put $5 million aside for research purposes, but it's not nearly enough. And I can commit to work with you and work with members of this committee to figure out ways that we can expand those efforts, because you, as many of us do, represent a host of universities around this country. Fresno State is one of the premier ag universities in the West, and clearly does a whole lot of good work, and they work in conjunction with other universities, but clearly don't have the opportunities that the land-grant universities do, and not to say that we shouldn't be doing more there. Dr. Humison, you made in your comments a statement about food security, and I want to tell all of you there testifying here this morning, each and every one of you play a critical role in food security, and it's something that I continue to come back to, because Americans take our food security, generally speaking, I believe, for granted, period. The fact of the matter is that American farmers, ranchers, dairymen, and women, none do it better in terms of our yield, our quality, and our nutritious values of the food products at a more cost-effective way. So well, in fact, that less than 3% of the nation's population is directly involved. and yet we can also export those food products to people who are hungry around the world. One of the factors that I think is attributed to that is our research that all of you are part of in ensuring that food security. And clearly, that must continue. I think one of the, I think we use many words here, or we overuse words here, like unique, but truly the relationship that has existed for over 100 years with land-grant universities and others in terms of this partnership is, I think, unique when you look at the European and other experiences. I think it's one of the reasons there's far more acceptance on biotechnology efforts as it relates to food safety here in the United States than in other parts of the world. Having said that, Dr. Humanson, you mentioned in your written testimony that the Specialty Research Initiative requires research proposals be multi-state, and of course this is difficult in California because we have such a diversity of crops that aren't grown elsewhere. How do you think we can, with this existing requirements that's impacting our agriculture, what changes would you recommend? And I have a couple other questions, so be quick, please. And thank you again for your good work.
Thank you. The really quick answer is either get rid of the requirement or the preference for multi-state or significantly reduce its weighting factor. I don't believe we're the only state with this problem.
No, other states have a lot of diversity as well. And under the specialty crop, and of course we worked very hard in the Farm Bill, again back in 2008, to create that, that title in the Farm Bill. SCRI, are otherwise known as organic research programs, that they're properly sized and prioritized within the NIFA research portfolio. What changes do you think we should make there?
Well, that's a great question. And the fact that Amazon just bought Whole Foods for all of us means that the demand for organic is about to skyrocket. Over 82% of American households already buy organic. And the problem is, our U.S. farmers are having a hard time dealing with that demand. And largely it's because of the lack of research that has been done on organics. We've got to step up to the plate, or our farmers are going to have a really hard time meeting market demands that are hitting them very soon.
Well, I think this is something in further testimony among all of you to provide input to the committee would be helpful as we're trying to reformulate the Farm Bill later this year and next year. I have some other questions, but time is running. Let me mention the citrus industry in California. You're very familiar with the disease research efforts and the extension of both SCRI and the CDRE has been. Can you talk about how the program is vital to not only California's multi-billion-dollar citrus industry, but Florida as well?
And Texas. In fact, I'm sure the other diseases out there.
I would not forget Texas, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sure the other diseases out there are quite jealous that you've got the 3 states here that are actually dealing with citrus screening. It's a huge problem, and the good news is we are finding some resolutions to it. They're not a fix. There's a long ways to go, but multidisciplinary efforts at vector control, quick assessment, being able to jump on it quick, proper pesticide use, et cetera, is getting us there.
And those universities in the 3 states all collaborate?
We're sharing a great deal of information, and we've got multi-state grants that we collaborate on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman's time expired.
Thanks.
What appears to be soon Second Lieutenant Rodney Davis is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm actually grateful that Chairman Conaway has given me the opportunity to once again chair the subcommittee on biotechnology, horticulture, and research, which is why I'm so thankful each and every one of you are here today to address this very important issue. As you're all aware, by 2050, the world's population is going to grow to 9 billion people, and it's predicted that our farmers will need to double their production to meet the demands of this growth. Now more than ever, it's imperative that we have to invest in ag research. So I really, truly appreciate all of your testimony. Many of our country's universities, the greatest obviously being in the state of Illinois. Jody's gone to witness that. I represent the University of Illinois, our land-grant institution, but also other ag research institutions like Illinois State University and Southern Illinois University at Edwardsville. And all of those institutions and others are at the forefront of ag research. But if we're to feed the world in 2050, how we have to answer, how do we keep on the cutting edge of ag research and competition so that our producers will meet that demand? And with that, Dr. Burns, I'd like to ask you a quick question. Can you touch on some of the research your university, University of Florida, is doing to achieve this goal of feeding the world in 2050?
Thank you. That's a very broad question, and let me attempt to provide at least some insight into what we're doing. First of all, in terms of biotechnology, we are using some of the most cutting-edge tools, like many of our colleagues here are, to try to advance solutions and provide alternatives. Some of our biggest problems are ones that can't be solved by conventional means. Those that continue to be problematic and we continue to throw money and effort in simply can't be solved by our conventional means and modes. So biotechnology plays a critical role, but it's the acceptance of these tools and techniques and the products that they deliver have been quite problematic. So in the future, it's hoped that, and I hate to bring this up, but citrus greening is a very important problem in our 3 states and worldwide. Technology, gene editing technology, CRISPR-9 technologies and so forth are going to be so important in solving those problems. Will it take an existential threat to and a takeout of an industry to see and prove that that these are going to be viable technologies and safe for the consumer?
You believe biotechnology and some of the biotechnological advances we already have in this country are completely safe, right?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, thank you. And you believe biotechnology is the key to us being able to grow more food on less land for a much higher population in 2050.
I do think that biotechnology is a tool that we can use to not only produce more food, but importantly, produce more nutritious food.
And keep being able to produce the foods that we enjoy now, a la fighting citrus greening and others.
And others, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you.
You know, 25 years ago, or a little longer than that, I've lost count, when I was in college, you know, I listened to a gentleman named Paul Ehrlich tell me about the population explosion and how by about this time in our world history, we'd be experiencing massive amounts of starvation. Now, there are areas of the globe that still are much hungrier than we are here in the United States. But obviously, through technological advances and through ag research that many of your institutions and other facilities have done over the years, we've stopped that from happening. So it's up to each and every one of you to continue that trend. Chancellor Duncan, I've never been to Texas Tech, but Jody says it's awesome. You're a non-land grant institution. Illinois State University in my district's a non-land grant institution that has an ag research facility too. From my visits there, you know, it appears that the institutions in your non-land grant category offer some great opportunities for research in the future too. Do you feel that you need more resources, and what resources are the USDA bringing to the table to help institutions like yours, and how can we move ahead in the future?
There's 2 things there, I think, that are involved. The capacity is really the significant issue, as we've talked about, but as well as additional money for competitive grants. You know, professors get disheartened when they produce grants that should be funded, but there's just not enough money. I think Texas Tech had 12 proposals at one point in time and got 2. And so I think, you know, you've got to keep your faculty interested. But the other thing is, if you look at the total amount of appropriations for the different programs, USDA gets $2.9 billion for this. But if you look at NSF, it's $8 billion. NASA gets $10 billion. DOE gets $12.6. NIH gets $33.1. We eat food every day. And food safety, food security, and the ability to produce quality, high-quality food at a low price, which we've been used to for all of our lives, is going to be significant. And the investment in research in that area, I think, will benefit this country greatly.
Thank you. My time's expired.
Chairman's time expired. Mr. Waltz, 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for being here. A critically important discussion. I know we're preaching a little bit to the choir to each other on this, and that might bring to the heart of some of my questions. we certainly in Minnesota know the importance of this with the work of Norman Borlaug at the University of Minnesota, which many of us tie back to. But I think we've all hit on this important piece of talking to the public, the interesting discussion on citrus greening and we say it, GMOs and the labeling issue that came up in talking to the public of the disconnect between where the research is and where the public is at. I think it's going to be critically important so that they understand. Dr. Talent, I had the opportunity to watch and see some of your researchers working on deer research down at your Kingsville station, and fascinating things out there, young, enthusiastic researchers trying to make a difference. But I think it is that trying to get the public and build these new coalitions. So, Dr. Duncan, I align right with you, and I think we need to be clear that we're not pitting our land-grant universities against our non-land-grant. There's critical importance there, and both serve a purpose. I represent Minnesota State University Mankato that I think has come up with a really unique partnership with our Greater Mankato Growth, our Chamber of Commerce, Green Seam. We are branding ourselves because we are at the center of medical research with the Mayo Clinic, with the Hormel Institute, and what we're doing with ag research, and tying those things together and explaining to the public that they're one and the same. Dr. Humminson, you mentioned it may not be the hot topic in agriculture. We need to make it that. We need to show them where it intersects. If you want to talk healthcare costs, the Hormel Institute's working on omega-3 fatty acids and how our food supply impacts that. So now all of a sudden, healthcare costs, healthcare bills, insurance costs are ag issues, and we are seen as the people who can solve that. So I ask all of you, how do you think we talk about this differently? What do you think you're seeing that make a difference? Because in my part of the world, people now recognize the economy is doing well. Ag is at the heart of that. And when ag struggles, we struggle, but the research piece has to remain constant. So I'll just throw it to you on that.
Well, that's an excellent question. We are doing two things right now in California, and other states are similarly doing the same. One is we're trying to engage more of our citizenry throughout the state in citizen science, so they start understanding the role science and research plays in their everyday life. And I think that's crucial. We're tying in 4-H and other programs to that. But secondly, and perhaps more importantly, I'm a firm believer that most people really care about their pocketbooks.
Yeah.
And all too often what happens is that the agricultural sector gets credit for its raw farm gate, which in California is almost $50 billion. It's a significant number, but when you compare it to the overall economy of California, I can't tell you how many times I get angry every month, at least 3 or 4, when somebody makes the incredibly stupid statement, ag is less than 2% of the GDP of California, why should we even care about it?
Yeah.
To combat that, we are updating a study that was done about 5 years ago looking at the value of our working landscapes, which includes agriculture, forestry, fisheries, mining, open space, recreation, renewable energy, the whole gamut of it. And we're looking at the full gamut of direct sales and multiplier. That study 5 years ago showed that working landscapes in California were over $300 billion in direct sales alone, and they really didn't even look at recreation on rural landscapes. We're updating that, and quite frankly, I think it's going to show that our working landscapes in California are well over a third, approaching a half the state's economy. People have to pay attention then.
We have to do a better job of messaging it. I know it too, and I think my time is running out, but I did want to mention in segue, I'm trying to figure out this ratio between competitive grants, matching funds, and everything else, because I too, like Mr. Costa and others, Mr. Peterson mentioned, worry about the organics because it is a huge growth industry. The market is starting to show that's what people want. The research is going to have to keep pace with that, and I don't know if the system now disincentivizes that type of research as opposed to some of the mainstream research. And I think that's what we need to focus on. But you have our commitment, critical role, more so than ever. You're hearing it from all the members up here who understand it. Now we need to figure out how to engage the public, because that's really where the will to get this done comes from. So thank you all. It's incredible work you're doing, and very supportive of it. I yield back.
Chairman yields back. Dr. Yoho, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it, and I appreciate y'all standing or sitting here. and going through this and educating us and giving us good information. Dr. Humiston, you were talking about getting the facilities up to date, and it's going to take a combination of local, state, and federal. We talk a lot about, and seeing the picture up here, we're heading into some tough times financially if we don't change some things up here, and of course that's our goal. But austerity measures are coming, and we need to prepare for that. And we had the University of Florida up here yesterday, the researchers. Knowing that, and I know this question has been asked about the coordination of research, and if we can belabor citrus screening again, one of the cures is going to be a GMO, one is going to be using an antibacterial. Are you guys coordinating that or other types of research to where if you're working on a transgenic type of tree, or are you guys coordinating that and say, this university is doing that, we don't need to do that, we can stay in touch with them? We're working on, say, a transgenic vector for the psyllid that's spreading that, and somebody else is working on this. Do you guys coordinate to that degree so we're not duplicating, so that we're getting more research done with less resources?
Absolutely. In fact, I included an example in my written testimony of how a researcher at UC Santa Barbara looking at thin cell solar technology has now adapted that to an entirely new way to deal with food safety issues.
Okay.
Down in the Los Angeles, San Diego area, which is one of the great aerospace sectors of the U.S., we're partnering up with them, NASA, Lawrence Livermore National Lab, to look at things like controlled environment agriculture. So increasingly, we're bringing together these very diverse multidisciplinary entities and collaborating.
Okay, and Dr. Burns, knowing one of the cures is going to be a GMO, and Dr. Humiston, you were also talking about you guys developed the machine harvesting of tomatoes, but first you had to make a plant that was more adaptable. I assume that was some kinds of transgenic type of modification or just plant selection. Was it a GMO type?
There were both.
Okay, so I want to ask the whole panel this. Knowing we're putting money in research and development into the GMO technology, knowing that the narrative on the internet is they're bad, but we know the Nobel laureate scientists, over 100 of them, have done a retrospective study talking about the safety of those. Are you guys doing any coordinated research or coordinating marketing efforts as you do the research to show the public that they're safe?
We have engaged, I know we have with the University of California, especially as it relates to the transgenic technologies for the Asian citrus psyllid. We have coordinated our marketing efforts in a proposed way to try to get the word out about the safety of this, as well as the synergies that could develop in other areas with developing such a technology, highlighting the screwworm and some of the successes that we've had in those areas. So I do think that there's a lot of coordination that goes on that is funded a lot by the USDA, NIFA, SCRI, and so forth. So I think it's really, really important to emphasize that competitive funding helps make that happen, but in order for us to survive as an industry, we must coordinate our efforts, and that's what we've done.
And we had a group of researchers come up yesterday from the University of Florida, and one of the things they were talking about is the cutbacks in this new budget. And they were talking about how much money, and I would like to ask all of you if you have time, how much money of your research dollar goes into research versus plant facilities like the buildings, things like that. If you were to take a percentage of that $1 you get research for a research project, how much goes into research itself? Any idea?
Well, I can answer that for the tribal colleges.
Yes, ma'am.
Our entire research program at USDA is $1.8 million for 34 institutions. It's a competitive program. So all of our money goes into research, and a lot of it by undergraduate students. So we're growing that pipeline. And we're able to do that through really strong partnerships with the state land grants and the agriculture research centers. So that's another area where I think the agriculture research centers are probably in older facilities that also need to be upgraded and sustained.
All right, I thank you for your answer. I'm out of time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman's time has expired. Now recognize gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. McGovern, for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for being here, and thank you for all the incredible work that you do. It's nice to witness this bipartisan chorus in support of agricultural university research. I just hope the budget that we enact reflects our rhetoric, because I think as you're pointing out, the research that goes on at your institutions is incredibly important, but we need to do more than talk the talk. I mean, we need to make sure that the funds are there, and I think that is a primary responsibility of government. I come from Massachusetts. I represent the University of Massachusetts Amherst. There's incredible research that goes on that campus, but I support agricultural university research at every level, including basic research. You know, USDA ARS programs and facilities, for example, are critically important resources for the nation and local economies. They advance cutting-edge research that benefits the national population while supporting thousands of jobs in their respective communities. A major key to ARS success has been collaborations with universities, and a prime example of one of those collaborations is the ARS Jean Mayer Human Nutrition Research Center on Aging at Tufts University in Boston, Massachusetts, which I'm very familiar with. The HNRCA is advancing the country's scientific knowledge in nutrition, food safety and quality, and research that focuses on solving problems that affect everyday Americans. And the current research that goes on at this facility is investigating the role that nutrition plays in cancer and heart disease, infectious disease, and Alzheimer's. And it's, you know, and research to find ways to continue to improve health care and save lives and generate economic growth for the nation. And one of the things that they have learned there is that diet-related disease has become America's largest single cause of premature death and disability. And as the baby boomer population continues to age, the research at this facility, for example, will become even more important to the nation's health. Now, USDA Economic Research Service estimated that for every dollar invested in agricultural research, there is an estimated $17 worth of economic impact. I mean, you may be reading about this horrible health care bill that is making its way forward that's going to throw millions of people off of health care. I assume that the supporters are backing it because they think health care costs are out of control. Well, some of the research that we're talking about here will control health care costs. We can avoid health care costs if we get this right at the nutrition level. And every single presidential administration that I can find has appreciated the importance of HNRCA since the center's inception in 1979, and has always supported it with a robust funding level. However, we go back to this budget question. You know, in the FY 2018 budget request, it is proposed that the total termination of this facility at Tufts, along with 16 other ARS laboratories, locations, and work sites. It would also cut ARS overall by 22%, targeting human nutrition research for a 50% reduction compared to the current enacted levels. So, and I just want to point out that last week before the Senate Ag Committee, ARS Administrator Shavonda Jacobs-Young testified that the key to ARS success is strong partnerships and collaborations with university researchers. So I guess my quick question to anybody here, because I'm really concerned that we're going to eliminate important research facilities that are vital to so many of the causes that we all say we care about. And I think it's important that we have to raise our voices in defense of some of these research dollars. So can any of you talk a little bit more about the collaboration between ARS facilities and academic researchers and why it's so important? And specifically, how do these collaborations support the USDA's capacity to conduct research on national and regional agricultural nutritional priorities?
Thank you. Those programs are specifically important, very, very important to having us continue to provide the knowledge it's going to take to create the next solution that's going to be transferred through technology. It's going to come from who knows where, but these partnerships cannot be dissolved. They have to be funded, they have to be encouraged, they have to be continued, because from that you never know where the next solution is going to come from. In terms of the University of Florida and its partnership with its sister institutions as well as with USDA, we have multiple projects that go on that without this partnership, they would be half of what they are. The USDA depends on us to do that extension sort of outreach to our constituents. And we depend on them to help us with the research, the cutting-edge research that's moving forward. So in all of those cases, and especially in the private sector, they are extremely important.
You know, I'm going to tell you, I just want to say, I think it's important that we not only talk the talk, but walk the walk. This research is incredibly important, and we need to make sure it's funded.
If I could add real quickly, we view the partnership so importantly. We have placed and currently have cooperative extension specialists actually functioning in ARS facilities, and they are a key partner in our statewide innovation and entrepreneurship initiative as well.
Thank you.
Gentleman's time has expired. Mr. Comer, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's great to see so many agriculture institutions represented here today. I have an agriculture degree and proud of that, and it's great to hear the good work that you're doing with agriculture research. I strongly support funding agriculture research. As a farmer, I understand how important it is as we continue to grow and expand our industry. One question I have, with respect to land grant funding for extension programs like 4-H and like agriculture extension agents, how has that been affected in your states, the ones that represent the land grant universities? I know in Kentucky we've seen some cuts to those programs that are vitally important in the district that I represent. Have those over the last few years been affected much?
Clearly, it's a challenge. The federal funding typically for us goes into the research aspects and as you said, the county cooperative extension advisors. But we've been real fortunate in California to work closely with our county governments who have frequently stepped up to the plate.
With taxing districts, right?
Pardon?
With taxing districts and things to fund that, is that?
No, just via the county government funding itself. We work in very close partnership with our actual county governments.
Okay.
In fact, in some counties, it varies a great deal county by county, but in some of them, we're a department within the 4-H and cooperative extension is considered a department within county government. In other ones, it's more like a joint powers agreement. It really varies.
Okay. Dr. Burns, I'm curious, what are some of the types of research that you are doing through the Specialty Crop Research Initiative and the Food Research Initiative at Florida?
With the SCRI, we have done pest and disease research that is providing strategies and, importantly, tactics to help our farmers survive, especially not in Florida, but also in the Southeast that have the same kind of pest pressures. Things like the strawberry program that is really very impactful within the Southeast. The food initiative programs and food safety programs that not only do the research, but also provide the critical training across these regions that help train our growers and partners and help them be productive. So those are a couple of important projects. The other important project that I'd like to highlight from on the AFRI side is our work, again, with citrus, identifying the genetic makeup of citrus, but importantly, some of the genes that are responsible for inferring resistance in things like citrus canker and other important invasive diseases of citrus that can be used later on downstream in a genome editing type of approach to create citrus that is resistant to citrus canker. These are the kinds of things that we like to highlight because they are so very important, built on previous and capacity funds and previous work, but also strengthened and accelerated with funds from SCRI and AFRI.
Good deal, good deal. I'm curious, Dr. Talent, what type of outreach does your university do to recruit top students for science-focused academic programs like agriculture research?
We have a number of programs, outreach that we're doing. I'll just name one very quickly. We have a NIFA grant where our Citrus Center brings in high school kids, promising high school kids in the Valley. They come work at our Citrus Center for a whole year, encouraging to get interested in agriculture and hoping they come to our university, but we're glad if they go to any university.
Right. Okay. Good deal. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Chairman yields back. Ms. Adams, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ranking Member Peterson, and to all of the witnesses. I want to thank you for your testimony today. It's good to have you back here to discuss this important topic. I'm especially pleased to see an old friend, Dr. Alton Thompson, here, North Carolina A&T. And Dr. Hill, we spent some time together in February during our bipartisan HBCU caucus with the 1890s roundtable, and you've been a great resource, and it's good to see you again. So in hopes of driving home the important issues that face our HBCUs, I'm a proud graduate of the North Carolina A&T State University, and know not only it to be a fine school, but our 1890s. And so I'm going to direct my questions to you, Dr. Hill. Our 1890 land grants are HBCUs established by the Second Morrill Act, which has also been mentioned here. But unfortunately, states have underfunded 1890s, and North Carolina, no exception. I served in the North Carolina House for over 20 years, and we continue to talk about this issue. And so it has created a number of challenges for our schools. The current state funding for North Carolina A&T is approximately $1.11 million less than the school's federal allocation. In other words, they do not receive a 1-1 match from the state. And it's a disparity that not only prevents A&T, but many other HBCUs from being able to expand their research and agricultural projects at the same rate and the level of the 1862s, which receive above matching funding in some cases. You mentioned that you have in your state, your schools work together with your legislature. I think that's a great thing. It's probably an example that we all need to follow. But let me ask you if you could describe some of the capacity challenges that Tuskegee has encountered in applying for competitive grants at USDA.
Well, thank you for that perspective and opportunity to respond. First, I want to go back to what we did in Alabama just for a second here, because what really allowed the movement to occur were the 3 deans. And those 3 deans went to Alpha, the agricultural leadership, the forestry commodity, poultry commodity, and all of us got together and we decided we wanted to do something different. So that dean at Auburn was a critical person. They have a new dean now at Auburn. And so it is a human thing, like most even research. It's the researcher working with the researcher. So that's something we just kind of shoot at people. But if we get people in closed doors and work that piece. The other thing is incentive. So again, like when the legislature came through with the 1-to-1, Tuskegee went from 0 match to some match. We're at about 90% now. I mean, that's awesome. So it's a matter of working those pieces. The other thing we could do is among the land grant leadership, because my colleagues here, we have our own places where we meet. If my colleagues, and I have some strong ones sitting here to my right in our group, decided they were going to speak up among their colleagues and push this, I believe we could do it, because we've done some other things here. So we need to look in the mirror, and we need to go ahead and do that. What difference does it make? A big difference. Like you say, the $1 million that North Carolina A&T would be able to utilize in terms of keeping those scientists, helping some students, and taking on and let me raise this point. Sometimes the 1890s will take on a problem that the big farmers in the state need help. That's what Carver used to do. And sometimes what we shouldn't do is assume the 1890s are only going to be doing them with small and minority farmers. But what we've got to do is leverage the best 2 scientists, because you have a Carver at North Carolina A&T and you have one at North Carolina State, and they put those 2 heads together, then you have that breakthrough. And I think we can do that a lot better. I think y'all need to incentivize us a little bit more.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I'm interested also in what you're doing in terms of partnerships as it relates to STEM. I'm just about out of time, but if you could give me a quick answer.
Yeah, well, STEM, again, at our school, engineering, mathematics, chemistry, we all work together. We have kids there right now, all summer long, coming, learning, whatever, and then we pipeline them through. I think what we need to do at the 1890s is look beyond ag into our other science and engineering area, get tight, like I know A&T is doing that, and really push the threshold. I think we should lead the nation in that. We're small enough, we're smart enough, it's time to do it. And California and Florida will come behind us if we did it the right way.
All right, thank you, sir. Thank you very much. I'm out of time.
Your latest time expired. Dr. Marshall, 5 minutes.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It truly is great to be here and talk about agricultural research. While Dr. Humiston stated that only 2% of the California income is agriculture, my district, agriculture represents 60% of our economy. So it certainly is very, very important. I'm a proud alumnus of a land-grant institution. My alma mater, Kansas State University, have invested time and energy in understanding what they are doing there for research. I'm very proud of their Wheat Innovation Center as well as their Biosecurity Research Institute. As we go forward, one of the things my professors back home talk about is facilities, and that we've been underfunding or deferring maintenance. So I think I'll go to Dr. Hill first. Are you guys have quite a bit of deferred maintenance issues going on? Can you just briefly speak to that? And how is it impacting current research?
Briefly, yes, yes. I mean, serious issues. We just did a master plan, and I think all the 1890s would have the same dynamic. So we have to do selection. We got to figure out which buildings we're going to tear down, which new ones we need to do, which ones we need renovation. I think all campuses are making those kinds of selections. So it's a highly critical and important issue.
Yeah. Chancellor Duncan, I'll kind of follow up with you, and if there was the follow-up part of that, if there was infrastructure dollars available, how would you prioritize them at Texas Tech?
At Texas Tech, we would prioritize improving labs. You know, labs are a continuous obsolescence issue, and as you go forward in research, you can buy a piece of equipment 5 years ago and it's obsolete. And so that's the continuing challenge as it relates, I think, to expanding research, and that's across our campus, but in particular with the agriculture research that we're doing. Cutting edge things come across develop every week, and so keeping up with that's very significant, and you have to do that in order to be competitive.
Okay, I'm going to go to Miss Billy next. One of your facilities is Haskell College in my state. And I'm just curious, are you familiar with any particular work you're working with Kansas State University or KU? How are those relationships going?
Well, Haskell Indian Nations University has partnerships with both Kansas State and, of course, KU, because KU's right there in Lawrence, Kansas. So they're actually doing a lot of research, a lot of STEM-related research, agriculture research, research into not just crops, but also range management, climate-related research, and then agriculture-related research related to cows, cattle production, and actually doing some international research in that area. So those partnerships are very, very strong. The larger universities sometimes share their faculty with Haskell. Good. And their students often transfer, and the faculty and researchers at the mainstream, the larger state institutions, are actually the mentors for the Haskell students. So it's a really strong, great partnerships. And they share their lab facilities as well.
I'm glad to hear that there is a positive relationship. I'm sure most of you know that NBAT, the National Bio-Agri-Research Facility, will someday be in Manhattan, and for the past 2 years we've been pouring concrete there, and it looks like we're now coming out of the ground. Certainly excited about that. Just curious if any of your facilities are currently working with Plum Island, the Animal Disease Center there, any relationships with any of them, because I would anticipate that someday that'll grow into a relationship with Kansas State University as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dr. Hill?
Yeah, well, our vet school, and I even visited Plum Island some time ago, but our scientists, because of the veterinary connection, have integral relationships with Plum Island.
Great. Dr.
I was just going to say, same thing for our veterinary school, as well as some of our cooperative extension researchers are working very closely.
Good. Anybody else working with Plum Island? Okay. Chairman, I yield back the remainder of my time. Thank you.
Chairman yields back. Mr. O'Halloran. Excuse me, Tom. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. University of Arizona is our land-grant institution, and I have a number of their research facilities within my district. After having visited them, it's not only that their research is involving the importance of drought management and soil management, but also the insect issues that relate in my area, especially to cotton. But over and above that, my life in the business area tells me that if you start to pull back on research, you start to pull back on your ability to work well into the future. And I just can't imagine how we, as an institution, can start to look out into the future and say whether it's here in agriculture or National Institute of Health or other areas that we're going to pull back and away from what I believe is an important feature of public safety to the American people. And as far as collaboration, in Arizona, everybody knows about the extension services. I mean, they help us out so much in dealing with our water issues and erosion issues, and throughout the entire perspective of what the state natural resources process is, and farming process, and ranching. But I also have a number of Native American tribes in my district, and I look back at the Hopi, and one of the things that the U of A is working on in many institutions is how to deal with drought management and soil management. And you look back in their history and their heritage and talk about dry farming. They know all about dry farming. And I don't understand how we can only be looking at institutions of the 1994s at $1.8 million and think that we have to understand that this history and this ability to use that historical perspective is important to the entire process moving out into the future. And so my question is going to be for Ms. Billy, and what I'd like to know is what is the role of the another question is better. What are the greatest barriers for the 1994s in conducting agriculture research? Because you had mentioned in your written testimony that they have a unique value that 1994 institutions can contribute. Could you please elaborate on that?
Yes, thank you very much. And I think the Native worldview, any different cultural worldview, bringing that into research is really important. And as you said, there's actually some really exciting research at Dinnett College in Arizona that the students are doing on testing different crops or grasslands, some grasses that have grown in Africa and other arid environments, and possibly seeing how they can genetically modify them to work in the Southwest that are very low water requiring and very high protein, which could really change the shape of range management, for example, in the Southwest. But the biggest challenges are capacity, two parts of capacity, not having the faculty because they're small institutions, so those big partnerships with the University of Arizona and other institutions are very important, not being able to attract the faculty, and then facilities, which everyone's talked about. Sort of ironically, I guess, we actually don't even have, in many cases, the facilities to be dilapidated because we don't have the funding to actually even build the facilities. So we'd like to get to that point where we have that, but facilities, even constructing new facilities and then rebuilding the labs that they have is a serious challenge. And another barrier is that in some instances, and I think researchers across the United States see this, it's easier to apply in some cases for funding from the National Science Foundation and NASA and other science agencies in a lot of cases than it is to apply and compete at USDA. So the small programs that we have, a lot of times they're applying to other federal agencies, which is hurting our agriculture research around the world.
Thank you, and I'll be giving you a call soon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield.
Chairman yields back. Mr. Arrington, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr.
Chairman, I'm very supportive of R&D and America's investment in R&D. I think it's incredibly important. I agree with Mr. McGovern. I might disagree with him on healthcare, but I will find common ground with him on R&D and what it's meant to this economy. We are the envy of the world for a lot of reasons, but one of them is because we have led in innovation. And it's noteworthy to know that GDP growth, some people say that 70%, upwards of 70% of GDP growth is innovation. And this, what you guys do at your institutions, is the seed corn for new technologies and startup companies and venture capital flowing to our country from all over the world. And so thank you for what y'all do. We need to help you. And as a member of the Budget Committee, the only Republican from Texas on the Budget Committee, I want to fight for R&D. I want to solve the budget crisis, the debt crisis. I just think that we can cut the discretionary domestic investment in infrastructure, R&D, and other things to the point of diminishing returns. We got to get after some mandatory spending cuts. Nobody wants to talk about that, but that's what we got to do, and we've got to stave off some of these deeper cuts that we've tried to balance the budget on the backs of some of these programs that I think have been very useful. As a former vice chancellor at Texas Tech for research and technology commercialization, I saw firsthand the value to the educational experience. We want to put the best and brightest in the marketplace. Discovery is a big part of that, right? I've seen the importance to our economy, startups, all the things we mentioned, but I've also seen, and let's take some language out of the Constitution and our mission, the general welfare of the public. The public benefits CAT scan, seat belts, rocket fuel, on and on, Google at Stanford, and I've witnessed firsthand the practical application and the value of that in the marketplace, solving problems for our producers, for our farmers and ranchers, et cetera. So my question is, broadly, how do we maximize the impact of federal R&D? Isn't that the question we should ask as stewards of taxpayer monies? How do we get the best return on investment? Here are three things that come to mind. I'd love for you to comment on them. One is the importance of public-private partnerships and leveraging private monies and combining federal dollars to enhance graduate student experience, but also focus on real problems that need to be solved. Dr. Hill, you mentioned we got to get it out of the lab into the field to really make a difference. People understand that. The public gets it when you put it in those terms. I'm not against fundamental research, but we've got to do more translational research, in my opinion. Tech transfer, we haven't talked about that yet. How do we translate this into a marketable, patentable product? It's revenue stream back into evergreen some of these research projects, and it's public good. It's products and services that are enhancing the quality of life for Americans, right? So what do we do to make that process easier for you guys, and how do we encourage you to do more of it? I'll just stop there on that one. I'll open it up to anybody. I don't want to, would you start, Mr. Chancellor?
Sure, I'll begin. I think this infrastructure funding is very necessary, and I know, as you know, your experience with transfer of technology and commercialization is important as well. You can start these projects, but you have to provide opportunities for your professors to be able, and for your institutions to be able to move these products into the market. At Tech, we have some demonstration projects on water conservation on the Ogallala. We have scarce resources of water, and they're getting scarcer. And Texas Tech has worked, I think, with private industry as well to be able to demonstrate different sorts of technology that have been developed at our ARS lab there at the Plant Stress and Soil Moisture Lab. And those sorts of demonstrations, getting those things out. But if you look at the end game, the overall investment by this country in agriculture we're low compared to the other areas. And I went through that a while ago, but I do think that is a significant issue that hopefully the Congress can look at and invest more for the future, because food security, food safety is going to be a significant issue going forward.
Absolutely. You know, we changed our tenure and promotion policy. We put metrics for tech transfer in tenure and promotion. What are the other universities doing with tech transfer, and do you think it's important, and what can the federal government do to incentivize more of this? Dr. Hill, any comments for anybody on the panel? And I yield back.
I want to make one thing. I hope it touches on your point. on state committee chair for FSA and have worked with RD for a long time. If there was a way we could get university research better connected with what they do with producers and RD, with communities and businesses, whatever, I think it will get at what you're trying to do as entrepreneur, the business part and all that. We already have extension people working in those areas, but your presentation now just made me think about that and where there's a big gap. If anybody knows how FSA and the problems they're having getting those micro loans and the big loans to the farmers and all that, what happens afterward, our research could be there working through that and extension people helping to minimize the gap in pain for both the government side and the farmer and community side. And the entrepreneur piece with RB, since it's being restructured and reorganized, maybe somebody needs to say something at this point before it gets all structured to get a university voice in there, and let's start trying some things.
Gentleman's time has expired. The long-suffering and patient gentlelady from Delaware who I skipped, Ms. Blunt Rochester, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank the panel. This is really interesting to me. I come from Delaware, where we have two great land-grant institutions, University of Delaware, which I'm a graduate, and also Delaware State University, which is a great HBCU. But I also wear the hat of having been a former senior research fellow at the University of Massachusetts, Boston, and worked on a grant that focused on building the capacity of minority-serving institutions, so I know many of the challenges that you face. But I'm on the biotech committee, biotech, horticulture, and research, and so I want to focus my first question on that. And it's to the entire panel. The United States is currently being outpaced by China in regards to our investment in agricultural research, and Brazil and India are not too far behind. What are the potential implications on the United States food supply and availability of qualified agricultural scientists and researchers for the whole panel?
Well, I'll throw a very quick answer out there because there's a slide available in a report that the Supporting Our Ag Research Group put out recently that very clearly shows as investment in our ag research has gone down, our productivity has. And as investment in Chinese ag research has gone up, their productivity in agriculture has. It's virtually a direct correlationship.
Anyone else on the panel?
Well, I think as we discussed earlier, and I think that federal and state investment in infrastructure and capacity that's how you do it. Mm-hmm. You've got to have continuity, long-term commitment, and predictability of funding so that scientists can develop, programs can develop. And again, biosecurity, food safety, those sorts of issues are the types of things that I think we have to start really investing in, and the capacity to do that is going to be very important.
Dr. Humiston, you actually started talking about just the fastest growing agriculture sectors in farming being organics. So for the panel, I'm curious, American farmers are struggling in this area to meet the consumer demand, and how are your universities helping organic farmers address challenges and meet the booming demand for organic products?
Two things there. One is organics is booming. There's no doubt about it. But almost equally booming is local. There are some people that would prefer to buy a local food product than an organic food product. But both sectors are rapidly growing, and not just in the coastal areas throughout the nation. We're doing a variety of things. We've taken the steps to create some of our research facilities having organically certified land so that we could conduct research there. Frankly, we've had a hard time attracting researchers because of the lack of funding for organic research. But more importantly, I think, is we're trying to make sure that all of our programs, all of our research aims at a triple bottom line sort of sustainability. People, planet, and prosperity. And that ends up being things like integrated pest management, where hopefully if you do everything right, you are organic. But you know, there's still that once in a rare time you need to use a product. And you use it appropriately and very targeted in a way that's safe for the environment and people. So we're very proud of our world-class integrated pest management program, something that we actually manage for the western states too. And I think more support for that, more open-ended, would be fine. But clearly organics and specialty crop, which is related in some cases, and frankly, sustainable ag research extension, which helps with all these. They need more focus, and we need to understand the needs of them more out in the public.
Yes, Dr. Hill.
Okay, oh, yeah, the project I alluded to earlier about, we have a scientist with a $2 million project before the universities, all 1862. So I was looking at, they're testing organic pesticides against major vegetable pests. They're doing on-site, advanced multi-location, multi-state on-farm trials. So, and they have some really sharp people. North Carolina's involved, Alabama, and I think Pennsylvania, whatever. So that now, $2 million over a 3-4 year period is nothing to actually deal with a regional project. So somebody should be looking at that and say, okay, let's reward that diversity and the scientists and quality, and let's give them a boost. Tell them to bring 4 more schools in. Texas, and who do we have? Arizona and Florida, you know?
Thank you. My time has expired, but hopefully if all of you could think of any adjustments that we need to also make to the grant criteria related to Ms. Billy's comments also about just the challenges of applying for agricultural grants. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Lady's time has expired. Mr. Dunn, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to direct my first question to Dr. Burns from the also great state of Florida. In recent weeks, the proposals have come up, resurfaced about imposing a cap, nominally 10% suggested, on the amount of facilities and administrative reimbursement related to the competitive federal grants. Could you speculate for us how the University of Florida would utilize, how does that impact your institution's capacity to perform research going forward?
Well, we depend on our indirect cost recovery to help us with all things related to research, especially as it relates to infrastructure improvements, building capacity in research, doing the things, the administrative side of a research program is tremendous. This indirect cost recovery is very, very important. Cutting that would be detrimental to the research enterprise at the University of Florida.
Can you give, like, is there a program that, something immediate that we can, this program, this research is going to go unfunded? Is there a program like that?
Are you asking me if...
Because of the cap, would you be cautious?
Because of the cap. We would have to strategize and prioritize research programs based on the amount of indirect costs that would come in. I think it's really important to once again emphasize the importance of full indirect cost recovery on our federal grants, because they are so important to maintain the capacity of research, the administrative side of research that really is not visible to our stakeholders and to our funding agencies, that we all know is really important to sustaining our research programs.
We're going to be down at the University of Florida this weekend, I believe. I hope you'll be there and you'll be able to make some specific points. Let me cast out to the panel also a question on GMOs. You know, it's a recurring theme in the question is GMOs, and I think all of us with a science background, you know that GMOs are not inherently bad. And I wonder where the undercurrent comes in our nation at large and our culture that is so anti-GMO, and where can we start this educational process? Is it high school? Is it middle school? And I toss that out because I'm at a loss to understand it.
But I'll just throw out some thoughts here. I think that our children and our young adults know where food comes from because we started their education about where it actually comes from early. And I think educating the public, especially as early as possible, about the benefits and the risks involved in all the things that we do in agriculture is extremely important. So starting people early with education, it has to be balanced, it has to be fair, it has to be honest. I think that is one of the main criteria for success is in keeping our population sort of in the know about the benefits and potential risks of any of our technologies, including GMOs.
Thank you very much for your comments, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, I was just going to add, this is something I mentioned earlier, trying to get our citizens more engaged in citizen science. Part of that's a larger effort to just combat the general scientific illiteracy amongst our general population. And you bring up GMOs, but quite frankly, it leads to lack of understanding over the value of vaccination, over the lack of understanding about the effects of climate change, and a host of other issues. GMOs is just one topic among many that we've really got to start improving STEM education and getting our citizenry more involved in science so that they understand it and are participating in it and can believe what's coming out of science.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Chairman yields back. Mr. Lawson, 5 minutes.
I was getting to wonder whether I was still here, Mr. Chairman. And as a follow-up, I won't go into how much I wanted to talk about the 1890 institution because Congressman Scott from Georgia did a very good job. But I would like to ask Dr. Burns, last week Governor Scott signed a bill to allow University of Florida and Florida A&M University to start an industrial hemp pilot program. What type of support do the two schools need from USDA to make the program work?
As you know, the legislation does not allow for any funding to come to these programs, but it mandates that these programs should occur, and it also implores us to go out and get private investments for these. It does request that we go and we work with our state agencies to provide the rules and the regulations that are going to be important to maintain the federal balance as well as the state balance in growing industrial hemp. So I would say that there is enormous opportunities for researchers to get involved with the private enterprise to do that kind of research, but there are some restrictions on the research as there are in many of the states that are conducting industrial hemp programs.
Okay, thank you. And during your discussion, you talked about alternative crop, which was interesting to me. Can you say what can we do in North Florida with alternative crops such as we have now in olives and peaches?
Yes, so we have olives and peaches. Pomegranates are also alternative crops that we're looking at that would be beneficial and maybe adaptable to our conditions. Blackberries are another one. Crossing over into the row crops, we have carinata, which is a new, for us anyway, in Florida, an energy crop that it can be directly converted into jet fuel. That is an enormous potential for us because it grows so well in Florida environments. Sesame is another alternative crop for us that has enormous potential. There are some issues and drawbacks with intellectual property and so forth with the companies, but overall I think, wow, is there great potential for alternative crops in Florida. Even the Californians are coming with their crops because they want to take advantage of the resources available in Florida, the water, and the humid environment, which are so great for pests, by the way.
And I'm interested in those. Congressman Dunn represents an area that I used to represent in the Senate, which is in Jackson County, and we are going to teach him a little bit more about farming. Come from the medical area. I represented him for 10 years, so I have to look out for him. But Dr. Hill, I feel like I grew up on Tuskegee campus for 2 or 3 reasons. My father-in-law finished from Tuskegee, E.T. Brooks, and Henry Brooks, who was very active as my brother-in-law. So I really been on that campus a great deal and to see the kind of research and so forth that are going on there. But my question, if I don't run out of time, is your testimony, you talked about the 1890 institution centers of excellence. Can you talk about how these centers would help propel the 1990 institution through the partnerships with the private sector? We talked about the other university, but how through the private sector?
Real quick, you cluster the farmers, you cluster small farmers, you co-op or cluster, 5 or 6. You get a contract with a Walmart or Kroger, whatever. The university comes in and leverages their expertise. They market, they make money. It's not like they were individually. It's not like the big farmer. If you run into other problems, you get a middle-sized farmer who has the right mentality, wants to work with them, or we got a larger farmer join. So the research is different. It's not just technology, irrigation, solar, et cetera, but it's social interaction among humans. And if you can work those pieces, then really the sky's the limit, because the buyer wants that. The public wants that. All the supporting commodity groups in the state want that. Our state legislature likes that. All of a sudden, you have friends all over the place because you brought people together and they're making a profit. So here the land grant puts their eye on the profit in a supporting role with all their economists, all their other people, and you get a different dynamic. It's new for us to do it that way, but it's great.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman's time expired. Mr. Thompson, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you to the panel, everyone in the panel that's here. I'm going to just throw this out there. Can you elaborate on the impact of extension and the relationships that extension has with those that they serve in the field and urban areas across America? Is extension adequately funded? Is it focused in the right directions? I know it's got such, with the different things that it addresses.
I can make some general statements in extension, although I'm not responsible for the extension programs. The urban sector is growing in Florida by leaps and bounds, as is the requirement and the need and the desire of our urban constituents to engage in some kind of agriculture. So our extension service has been very important in extending some of those knowledges, agricultural knowledges, to our urban society. Having said that, there are some frictions between our rural and urban sectors, as I'm sure there are in other locations, and some of our rural constituents think that we might be spending too much time in one area and the other, and vice versa. So I think that extension continues to be important as we transfer knowledge from the research side into a more applied setting where it can be useful to our constituents.
I do oversee extension for the state of California, and I can say very clearly we have far, far more demand than we have resources to make available, both urban and rural. One thing we are trying to do, again, I've mentioned several times earlier, leveraging collaboration, but to Dr. Hill's point, we're trying to help formulate, catalyze large regional efforts along the entire farm-to-fork food chain and use that as economic development opportunities both in urban areas and tied to rural. I mean, the reality is we don't want our food processing facilities on our ag land. They belong in cities and rural communities, and there's a partnership to be had there, and that's typical of some of the type of community and economic development cooperative extension can be very excellent at.
The National Institute of Food and Agriculture's competitive grant program, which is the Agriculture and Food Research Initiative, provides funding to support research, education, extension activities in 6 Farm Bill priority areas: plant health and production, plant products, animal safety, production, animal products, food safety, nutrition, health, bioenergy, natural resources, environment, agriculture systems and technologies, and agriculture economics and rural communities. It's my understanding that AFRI success or funding rate for AFRI applications is 13% in a 3-year rolling average. Should the next Farm Bill authorize AFRI at a higher level?
Actually, I think most of us would be thrilled if it was authorized at the same level, but appropriated up to the full level. It has rarely gotten more than half, if that, of what's been authorized. So it really needs to be a partnership with the appropriators to get the funds in the field.
Okay. And my last question is, obviously, biosecurity has come up a number of times in this hearing, and it's crucial to protecting the almost $1 trillion agriculture industry that contributes to the U.S. GDP in 2015. How can NIFA programs at USDA continue to protect the integrity, reliability, sustainability, and profitability of U.S. food and agriculture systems against threats from pests, diseases, contaminants, and disasters?
I did offer at least a few points in my written testimony that I'll share an example of, and that is, again, partnership. NIFA is a wonderful, wonderful organization, but it can't do everything. No one agency can. Within USDA for California, a very key agency is APHIS, our Animal Plant Health Inspection Service. Given the wide array of specialty crops we have, as well as Florida, it often feels like we're getting a new pest of some sort every week. APHIS is crucial to us, as is Ag Marketing Service, which funds the specialty crop block grants. And NRCS, National Resources Cooperation Service, Conservation Service. We just signed an MOU a few weeks ago to greatly improve how Cooperative Extension, NRCS, our State Department of Food and Ag, and our resource conservation districts can collaborate to deliver on a variety of programs. So this is where you see some of that cross-cutting between titles. Even though we're the research title, we actually work with quite a few of the others. One thing I did recommend is that preference be given for Cooperative Extension to serve as technical service providers within the conservation title. And you could find several other examples like that.
Thank you.
Gentlemen's time has expired. I want to thank our witnesses for being here today. Each of you has presented a compelling case as to why research is important and why it ought to be a high priority. All 5 of you are really familiar, though, with the struggle with setting priorities and making hard choices between good stuff. It's rare that you have to make a choice between a good and a bad. We just all have to make choices between the good. And having your input, having this in the public record, having this a part of the Farm Bill work that we'll do late this winter, early next year, will really be terrific, and laying that marker down as to why it's important. The research dollars you've already been getting, that you're using those effectively, and you all presented good ideas on terms of cross-pollination among institutions and or the public and private sector. All of those things will be important, and I, for one, appreciate the time you spent this morning helping to educate not only the members of the public, but also those that are the millions and millions of folks watching on C-SPAN this morning that are also heard the testimony as well. So again, thank you very much, and this will be a good part of what we look at when we look at the hard decisions that the committee now will have to make, and when we do the 18 Farm Bill. Under the rules of the committee, the record of today's hearing remained open for 10 calendar days to receive additional material and supplemental written responses from the witness to any question posed by a member. This hearing on the Committee of Agriculture is adjourned. Thank you.